Did you know that behind the glittering facade of old Hollywood lurked studio executives who controlled every aspect of stars' lives, even their pregnancies? What if I told you some of the most beloved actresses from the Golden Age were forced to choose between motherhood and their careers? Hollywood's darkest secret wasn't caught on camera, but played out in private doctors' offices across Los Angeles. Joan Crawford. Joan Crawford may have adopted 4 children later in life, but her path to motherhood was paved with studio-mandated procedures. MGM considered Crawford too valuable to risk pregnancy complications. Inside sources claim she underwent at least 5 terminated pregnancies throughout her career, all at the insistence of Louis B. Mayer in his publicity department. During her marriage to Douglas Fairbanks Jr., Crawford became pregnant twice, but MGM executives immediately arranged medical consultations. They convinced her that motherhood would destroy her glamorous image and strand her in mommy roles. One MGM executive reportedly told her, "Audiences want to fantasize about you, not see you pushing a baby carriage." Crawford's adopted daughter Christina later wrote about her mother's deep-seated regrets, claiming these forced procedures left Crawford with a complicated relationship to motherhood that contributed to her sometimes harsh parenting style. MGM's iron grip on her reproductive choices haunted Crawford long after she left the studio, proving that Hollywood's control extended far beyond the screen. Judy Garland. The innocent Dorothy from Wizard of Oz lived under MGM's relentless control, extending even to her pregnancies. When 19-year-old Garland married David Rose, she quickly became pregnant. Studio head Louis B. Mayer was furious. MGM had invested millions creating her girlish image, and a baby would shatter the illusion. Studio fixers arranged a secret appointment where Garland was given no real choice. "They told me I couldn't have a baby and a career," Garland later confided to friends, "and they made the decision for me." The emotional trauma compounded her existing struggles with studio-supplied amphetamines and barbiturates. MGM publicists spun the story, telling gossip columnists that Garland had suffered exhaustion during her 2-week absence. When she returned to the set hollow-eyed and subdued, co-stars were instructed not to mention her absence. This pattern of control would follow Garland throughout her career, contributing to her lifelong battle with depression and substance issues. The price of stardom for Judy wasn't just measured in Oscar nominations, but in deeply personal sacrifices few fans ever knew about. Jean Harlow. The original blonde bombshell paid a devastating price for her platinum image. In 1934, during her tumultuous marriage to producer Paul Byrne, Harlow discovered she was pregnant. MGM executives went into panic mode. Their sex symbol couldn't be seen with a baby bump. Studio head Louis B. Mayer personally called Harlow to his office, where he explained that her contract prohibited pregnancy. Her options were brutally simple: terminate or be blacklisted. Documents from MGM's legal department show they drafted termination papers before even speaking with her, knowing she couldn't afford to fight them. The procedure was arranged at a private clinic in Glendale, with MGM's personal physician overseeing everything. Harlow returned to set just 3 days later, filming romantic scenes while privately hemorrhaging. Makeup artists were instructed to use extra foundation to hide her pallor. This physical trauma likely contributed to her declining health. Harlow died just 3 years later at age 26 from kidney failure, her body worn down by studio demands and personal heartbreak. Lana Turner. Hollywood's sweater girl faced the studio's reproductive control multiple times. Her affair with Tyrone Power in 1946 resulted in an unplanned pregnancy, sending MGM executives into damage control mode. Both stars were at the peak of their careers, and a scandal would jeopardize millions in potential box office revenue. Turner later revealed that studio head Louis B. Mayer called her personally, "He didn't ask what I wanted. He told me what would happen." MGM arranged for Turner to visit a spa in Palm Springs, where a doctor performed the procedure in a private bungalow. Power never visited her, having been warned by his own studio to distance himself. When Turner returned to set for Green Dolphin Street, director Victor Saville was instructed to avoid close-ups for 2 weeks while she recovered. Turner's daughter Cheryl, born years later, wrote about her mother's pain. Those forced decisions haunted her. She wondered about the children she never had. Turner's glamorous image masked a woman who had suffered deeply under the studio system's control. Bette Davis, Hollywood's most fearless actress, battled Warner Brothers over roles, salary, and working conditions. But even she couldn't escape reproductive control. In 1934, as her star was rising, Davis became pregnant during her relationship with William Wyler. Jack Warner, who had invested heavily in marketing Davis as a sophisticated femme fatale, intervened directly. Studio memos uncovered decades later revealed Warner's ultimatum: resolve the situation or contract suspended. Davis, who had fought so hard for recognition, couldn't risk losing everything. A studio doctor performed the procedure at her home, with production on Dangerous delayed by just 3 days. Davis later confided to close friend Olivia De Havilland that this forced choice was the greatest regret of my life. When she won her first Oscar for Dangerous months later, only her inner circle knew the personal price she'd paid. Davis's famous line, "What a dump," took on painful personal meaning. She had been dumped by the very industry that claimed to value her, yet treated her body as studio property. Rita Hworth, the love goddess who drove men wild on screen, was privately controlled by Columbia Pictures boss Harry Cohn. During her tumultuous relationship with Orson Welles, Hworth became pregnant in 1945. Cohn, who micromanaged every aspect of Hworth's image, immediately moved to protect his investment. Columbia's publicity department crafted a cover story about Hworth needing rest due to exhaustion from her demanding dance numbers. Meanwhile, studio fixers arranged for a discreet procedure at a private residence in Bel Air. Welles, himself under contract pressures, was filming in New York and never publicly acknowledged the situation. Hworth later told her daughter Yasmin, "I wanted that baby, but they told me my fans would never accept me as a mother." The trauma deepened Hworth's alcohol dependency and contributed to her 5 failed marriages. When she eventually gave birth to Yasmin years later, she faced studio backlash and fewer role offers, proving their threats had been real. Hollywood's love goddess discovered that real love and motherhood came at an impossible professional price. Marilyn Monroe, America's most famous blonde bombshell, harbored a secret desire for motherhood that Hollywood repeatedly denied her. During her contract with 20th Century Fox, Monroe became pregnant at least 3 times, each ending in studio-pressured terminations. Her personal diaries, revealed years later, expressed her anguish. "They're killing my babies to keep selling movie tickets." During filming of Some Like It Hot, Monroe discovered she was pregnant by playwright Arthur Miller. Studio head Darryl F. Zanuck dispatched his personal doctor to her trailer between takes. The doctor bluntly informed Monroe that her contract prohibited pregnancy and presented termination as her only option. She was back on set within 48 hours, filming comedic scenes while privately devastated. Monroe's makeup artist, Whitey Snyder, later revealed that he used special techniques to hide her puffy eyes and pallor. Director Billy Wilder, unaware of the real situation, complained about her frequent bathroom breaks. Actually, moments when Monroe would privately vomit from emotional distress and post-procedural complications. Her famous line, "Nobody's perfect," took on tragic irony as the studio demanded physical perfection at any cost. Ava Gardner, MGM's exotic beauty, faced the studio's reproductive control during her relationship with Frank Sinatra. When Gardner became pregnant in 1952, both MGM and Sinatra's management team panicked. Sinatra was still legally married to his first wife, making the pregnancy not just a career issue, but a potential criminal one under California's morality laws. Studio fixers arranged a secret procedure at a private clinic outside Los Angeles. Gardner was transported in a studio limousine with tinted windows and registered under a false name. MGM publicity chief Howard Strickling crafted a cover story about Gardner suffering from food poisoning during her 2-week absence from Mogambo pre-production. Gardner later confided to close friend Lena Horne that the studio gave her no choice. "They owned my body as surely as if I'd signed it over in blood." This experience contributed to Gardner's legendary drinking and her cynical view of Hollywood. She never had children, later telling journalist Barbara Walters, "The studio made sure of that." Ingrid Bergman. Even an Oscar-winning star like Bergman couldn't escape Hollywood's control. Though Bergman is famous for the scandal of her out-of-wedlock child with Roberto Rossellini, few know about her earlier pregnancy during her Selznick contract. In 1943, while married but separated from her first husband, Bergman became pregnant by a cinematographer. Producer David O. Selznick, who had carefully crafted Bergman's wholesome image, was furious. Studio records show Selznick arranged for Bergman to visit a health retreat in Northern California, where a doctor performed the procedure. Bergman was back filming Gaslight within days, with special lighting used to mask her pallor. The experience left Bergman with a determination to eventually escape Hollywood's control. When she later became pregnant by Rossellini, she refused termination despite knowing it would destroy her American career. Her famous line, "I regret nothing," wasn't just movie dialogue. It reflected her hard-won personal autonomy after years under studio control. Dorothy Dandridge, Hollywood's first black female A-list star, faced even harsher reproductive control than her white counterparts. When Dandridge became pregnant by director Otto Preminger in 1955, studio executives at 20th Century Fox didn't just worry about her image, they feared racist backlash against an unmarried black woman's pregnancy. Studio head Darrell F. Zanuck summoned Dandridge to his office, where he explained that her groundbreaking role in Carmen Jones would be meaningless if scandal destroyed her career. Publicity materials were already promoting her as the Black Grace Kelly, a comparison that required Dandridge to maintain an impossible moral standard. The procedure was arranged at a doctor's private residence, as many medical facilities were still segregated. Dandridge returned to work within days, filming promotional interviews for Carmen Jones while still recovering physically. This trauma deepened her struggles with depression and alcohol, contributing to her tragically early death. Hollywood had given Dandridge a historic opportunity with one hand, while controlling her personal autonomy with the other. Veronica Lake, the peekaboo blonde whose hair inspired millions of women, faced Paramount's strict reproductive control. When Lake became pregnant by director Andre de Toth in 1943, the studio had just invested heavily in marketing her distinctive look for The Hour Before Dawn. Executives saw pregnancy as a threat to their investment. Studio records show a calculated financial decision. Paramount determined that delaying production would cost $150,000, while arranging a quick termination would cost under $1,000. Head of production B.G. De Silva gave Lake no real choice. It's this or contract suspension. For an actress supporting her family, suspension meant financial ruin. The procedure was performed at a private clinic in Santa Barbara, with Lake returning to set within 72 hours. Her famous hair was styled to cover her exhausted face. This experience contributed to Lake's growing alcohol dependency and her bitter attitude toward Hollywood. When her career eventually faltered, Lake famously worked as a bartender, telling customers, "Hollywood took everything from me, even my children." Hedi Lamar, the Austrian beauty marketed as the most beautiful woman in films, faced MGM's reproductive control despite her scientific genius. When Lamar became pregnant during her contract in 1942, studio head Louis B. Mayer saw only a threat to her sensual image, not considering that a brilliant woman might want motherhood alongside her career. MGM records show Mayer arranged a meeting where he reminded Lamar of her precarious position as a foreign national during wartime. The unspoken threat was clear. Her career and possibly even her American residency depended on compliance. Studio doctors performed the procedure at Lamar's home, with production on White Cargo delayed by just 3 days. The trauma influenced Lamar's later scientific work on frequency hopping, which she developed partly as a way to control something in her life after Hollywood controlled her body. The technology that would eventually help create Wi-Fi and Bluetooth was born partly from Lamar's determination to make decisions denied to her by studio executives who saw her as merely a beautiful face. Ginger Rogers, the dancing partner who did everything Fred Astaire did backwards and in high heels, also navigated RKO's reproductive control. When Rogers became pregnant by actor Lou Ayres in 1934, studio executives saw a threat to the magical Rogers-Astaire partnership that had saved RKO from bankruptcy. Studio head Pandro Berman calculated the financial impact. Delaying the gay divorcee would cost hundreds of thousands, while their new dance team was worth millions. Rogers was presented with simple math: terminate or be replaced. For a Depression-era actress supporting her mother, the choice was effectively made for her. The procedure was performed at a private clinic, with Rogers returning to dance rehearsals within a week. Choreographer Hermes Pan later recalled Rogers wincing during difficult moves, but refusing to complain. This experience contributed to Rogers' famous independence and her later fights for better working conditions. When she won her Oscar for Kitty Foyle, few knew it represented not just professional triumph, but personal resilience in the face of studio control. Myrna Loy, MGM's perfect wife, faced the studio's reproductive hypocrisy. Though Loy portrayed ideal mothers on screen, when she actually became pregnant by producer Arthur Hornblow in 1936, MGM executives were horrified. They had invested heavily in Loy's image as the sophisticated yet wholesome partner to William Powell in the popular Thin Man series. Studio records show a calculated decision. MGM determined that a pregnant Myrna Loy would damage her appeal in romantic comedies and potentially violate morality clauses in theater contracts. Loy was summoned to Louis B. Mayer's office, where he explained her contractual obligations prohibited pregnancy. The procedure was arranged at a private physician's home in Pasadena. Loy returned to filming After the Thin Man within days, with special costumes designed to hide weight loss and pallor. This experience contributed to Loy's later activism and her pioneering work with the United Nations. Hollywood had forced her to terminate a real pregnancy while continuously casting her as the ideal screen mother, a hypocrisy Loy never forgot. Clara Bo. The original It Girl faced Paramount's brutal reproductive control. When Bo became pregnant by actor Gary Cooper in 1927, studio executives saw only disaster. Bo's flapper image represented youthful freedom, not motherhood, and Paramount had invested millions in marketing her as the quintessential carefree girl. Studio head B.P. Schulberg arranged a private meeting where he explained that Bo's contract prohibited pregnancy. In the silent era, actresses had even fewer protections than later stars. Bo was given a simple ultimatum: terminate or be replaced and blacklisted. For a working-class girl supporting her mentally ill mother, the choice was effectively made for her. The procedure was performed at Schulberg's private beach house by a studio-approved doctor. Bo returned to set within days, filming lighthearted romantic scenes while privately devastated. This trauma deepened her existing mental health struggles and contributed to her early retirement from film. Hollywood's first major sex symbol discovered that her image of freedom came with invisible chains. Susan Hayward, the fiery redhead who specialized in playing strong women, faced 20th Century Fox's reproductive control. When Hayward became pregnant during her contract in 1944, studio head Darryl F. Zanuck saw a threat to her rising career. Fox had just cast Hayward in Deadline at Dawn, and pregnancy would delay production. Studio memos reveal a cold calculation. Fox determined that replacing Hayward would cost $75,000, while arranging a termination would cost under $1,000. Hayward was presented with these figures in Zanuck's office, with the studio's decision already made. As a supporting actress still establishing herself, Hayward had no real power to refuse. The procedure was performed at a private clinic in San Diego, with Hayward returning to Hollywood within days. This experience informed her later powerful performances of women fighting against systems larger than themselves. When she eventually won her Oscar for I Want to Live, playing a woman sentenced to death, colleagues noted the personal resonance in her performance of a woman whose body and fate were controlled by others. Gene Tierney. The actress with the most beautiful face in cinema faced 20th Century Fox's reproductive hypocrisy. Though Tierney later famously had a daughter with birth defects due to a fan with rubella approaching her during pregnancy, few know about her earlier studio-mandated termination. When Tierney became pregnant by designer Oleg Cassini in 1941 before their marriage, studio head Darryl F. Zanuck saw a threat to her carefully crafted image. Fox had just launched Tierney in The Return of Frank James and was marketing her as both sophisticated and wholesome. A pregnancy outside marriage would shatter this contradictory image. Studio records show Zanuck arranged a meeting where he reminded Tierney of her contractual obligations. The procedure was performed at a private physician's home in Malibu, with Tierney returning to promotional duties within days. This experience contributed to her later mental health struggles, as she connected this forced decision to the tragedy of her daughter's disabilities, wondering if it represented cosmic punishment. Carole Lombard, Hollywood's queen of screwball comedy, faced Paramount's reproductive control. When Lombard became pregnant during her first marriage to William Powell in 1933, studio executives panicked. Paramount had invested heavily in Lombard's image as a sophisticated, childless comedian in films like 20th Century. Studio head Adolf Zukor summoned Lombard to his office, where he explained that her contract prohibited pregnancy. Zukor, known for his business acumen, presented cold figures. Paramount would lose $200,000 if production schedules were delayed, while Lombard would lose future roles if she chose motherhood over career. The procedure was arranged at a private physician's home in Santa Barbara. Lombard returned to filming within days, performing physical comedy while still recovering. This experience influenced her later contract negotiations and her famous independence from studio control. When she married Clark Gable years later, she insisted on contract provisions that would allow for family planning. A revolutionary concept in 1930s Hollywood. Tallula Bankhead. Broadway's most outrageous star faced Hollywood's reproductive control when she attempted a film career. Though Bankhead was known for her libertine lifestyle, when she became pregnant in 1932 during her Paramount contract, studio executives were concerned about potential scandal affecting box office returns. Paramount production head B.P. Schulberg arranged a private meeting where he explained that Bankhead's pregnancy would violate California's morality laws and potentially lead to criminal charges, along with contract termination. For Bankhead, whose Broadway success hadn't yet translated to Hollywood, the financial threat was significant. The procedure was performed at a private clinic, with Bankhead returning to set within days. Unlike many actresses, Bankhead spoke openly about the experience years later, telling journalist Alexander Walker, "Hollywood owned everything, my voice, my face, and apparently my womb." This experience contributed to Bankhead's eventual return to Broadway, where she found greater creative and personal freedom than Hollywood ever allowed. Mel Oberon. The exotic beauty who hid her mixed-race heritage faced additional reproductive control from Alexander Korda's London films. When Oberon became pregnant by David Niven in 1939, Korda saw not just a threat to her career, but to the elaborate fiction constructed about her background. Studio records show Korda arranged a meeting where he reminded Oberon of her precarious position. If scandal led to investigations about her pregnancy, her carefully hidden Indian ancestry might be exposed, potentially ending her career during an era of strict anti-miscegenation sentiment. The unspoken threat was clear: comply or risk everything. The procedure was performed at a private physician's home in London, with Oberon returning to filming Over the Moon within days. This experience deepened Oberon's existing insecurities about her identity and contributed to her lifelong anxiety. Hollywood's control extended beyond her body to maintain the racial deception both she and the studio perpetuated. June Allison, MGM's Girl Next Door, faced the studio's reproductive hypocrisy. Though Allison portrayed wholesome mothers on screen, when she actually became pregnant by Dick Powell before their marriage in 1945, MGM executives saw only a threat to her carefully crafted image. Studio head Louis B. Mayer arranged a meeting where he explained that Allison's contract prohibited pregnancy outside marriage. MGM had invested heavily in marketing Allison as America's sweetheart, and a scandal would undermine millions in publicity. For an actress still establishing herself, the financial threat was impossible to ignore. The procedure was performed at a private clinic outside Los Angeles, with Allison returning to set within days. This experience created a painful contrast between her screen image as the perfect mother and her private reality. Allison later had children with Powell after marriage, but friends noted she struggled with guilt over her earlier forced choice, a psychological burden carefully hidden behind her trademark sunny smile. Ann Sheridan, Warner Brothers' oomph girl, faced the studio's reproductive control during her rise to stardom. When Sheridan became pregnant in 1942 during her contract, studio head Jack Warner saw a threat to her carefully crafted sex appeal that had made her a popular pinup for soldiers during World War II, Studio memos reveal Warner's calculation. Maintaining Sheridan's availability for morale-boosting USO appearances was worth more financially than respecting her pregnancy. Sheridan was presented with simple facts: terminate or face contract suspension and potentially be labeled unpatriotic during wartime for refusing to entertain troops. The procedure was performed at a private residence in Malibu, with Sheridan returning to promotional duties within days. This experience fueled her later contract disputes with Warner Brothers and her famous quote, "Hollywood gives a woman everything except control." When she eventually gained independence from the studio system, colleagues noted it wasn't just professional freedom she sought, but personal autonomy after years of having even her most intimate decisions controlled by executives. Linda Darnell. 20th Century Fox's Girl with the Perfect Face confronted the studio's reproductive control at just 19 years old. When Darnell became pregnant in 1939, studio head Darryl F. Zanuck saw a disaster in the making. Fox had spent 2 years marketing Darnell as a virginal ingenue, with publicity materials emphasizing her youth and innocence. Studio records show Zanuck summoned Darnell's mother, who also served as her guardian and manager, to a private meeting. Mrs. Darnell, focused on her daughter's earning potential, agreed with Zanuck that the pregnancy threatened their financial future. Linda was given no real choice in the matter. The procedure was arranged at a private clinic, with Darnell returning to filming Stardust within days. This experience contributed to Darnell's later rebellion against her controlling mother and the studio system. Her famous beauty masked growing cynicism about an industry that marketed her purity while controlling her body. When she died tragically in a house fire at age 41, colleagues noted that Darnell had never found the personal happiness her screen image promised. Olivia De Havilland. Even Hollywood's greatest fighter for actors' rights faced reproductive pressure. When De Havilland became pregnant during her Warner Brothers contract in 1941, studio head Jack Warner saw a threat to production schedules and her marketable image as the sweet ingenue opposite Errol Flynn. Warner summoned De Havilland to his office, where he explained that her pregnancy would delay "They died with their boots on," costing the studio thousands daily. For De Havilland, already engaged in contract disputes with Warner Brothers, the unspoken message was clear. This pregnancy could be used against her in ongoing legal battles. Unlike many actresses, De Havilland refused termination, instead negotiating a production delay. Warner retaliated by suspending her contract, effectively extending her 7-year servitude. This experience contributed to De Havilland's landmark legal victory that broke the studio contract system. The De Havilland decision freed actors from involuntary servitude, a fight for autonomy born partly from her refusal to let studios control her reproductive choices. Bette Davis. Hollywood's most formidable actress faced Warner Brothers' reproductive control early in her career. When Davis became pregnant by director William Wyler in 1934, studio head Jack Warner saw a threat to her rising career and the production schedule for Dangerous. Warner Brothers' legal department drafted a memo outlining Davis's contractual violations if she continued the pregnancy. Davis, not yet powerful enough to challenge the studio, faced a brutal calculation: terminate or potentially lose the career she had fought so hard to establish. The procedure was performed at Davis's home by a studio-approved physician. She returned to set within days, delivering the Oscar-winning performance in Dangerous while still recovering physically and emotionally. This experience fueled Davis's famous battles for autonomy and her legendary quote, "I survived because I was tougher than anybody else." What audiences saw as ambition was also personal resilience forged in Hollywood's crucible of control. What star's story shocked you the most? Hollywood golden age wasn't all glamour and champagne. It was control, manipulation, and devastating personal sacrifices. Were studios justified in controlling actresses' bodies to protect investments, or was this the entertainment industry's darkest exploitation? Let us know in the comments below if you think today's celebrities have it easier, or if Hollywood's control has just taken new forms.